We've looked at the prana, the first and probably the most elemental vayu, because it is the drawing in of the prana, or in the physical sense, the air. The direction is upward and spreading. It has an important co-worker, which is the Apana prana, corresponding significantly with the Muladhara chakra. So we know that as the primal soil, the rock, all kind of bodily functions and things. The Apana prana is used for elimination, metaphysically or mentally speaking, the elimination of thoughts that don't serve us. And we'll see that the prana vayu drawn into the chest, upward to the head, reaching down to connect with apana prana through the samana prana, which is significantly corresponding to Manipura chakra. This Samana prana, as you see from the circular action, and it's also related with fire, has everything to do with processing and the burning off of dross. And it is through that fire that the separation process that we spoke of earlier, of maybe traumatic experiences, through which we can pull a lesson. And we want to keep the lesson, but not the trauma. This mental process, this pranayama exercise of drawing things through the samana prana and out through the apana prana, is super helpful for the release of things that don't serve us. Now, let's take a look at this samana vayu, vayu being another word for wind or prana. So I could say samana prana, or I could say samana vayu. That's why prana is a little confusing. I think you might have already grasped that. The word samana vayu kind of means balancing. And this vayu is responsible for the absorption of nutrients and their processing. So we think of food as the kind of physical element, and this food is processed through the digestion. And if we simply let that move to the mental, it is the processing of ideas. It goes beyond the monkey mind, where we just notice the chatter. This is more the wisdom mind setting in. So related to the koshas. So this samana prana, is related to the Manipura chakra. For some reason, that chakra always kind of flees in my mind. And processes information. So the location of the solar plexus, I see it as kind of vaguely all around the belly button, but the traditional treatises have put it slightly below the belly button. So in chakra sense, Svadhisthana and Manipura. It is responsible on the gross level for digestion, absorption of nutrients, on the slightly higher level for the beginning of separating wisdom from trauma, things like that. The injuries or the dissipation of this might be anything you think it could be, but possibly the assimilation of ideas, the ability to focus once again. We'll see this kind of often. The sifting of helpful from non-helpful memory. This one is also helpful in allowing the prana vayu to keep the connection to the apana. Ailments are, indigestion, bloating, and the inability to absorb the correct nutrients. Mentally, we can imagine it as keeping the mind running without any blockages. It reminds me of what Mark Twain once said to a woman who gave him her opinion. He said, "Madam, your opinion of me is none of my business." I like to think of that when we do anything with the Manipura chakra or with the system, like we do the wind removing pose, that everything can flow through us without any obstacle, without any obstruction. So think on all levels of this Samana prana helping everything move fluidly. There's a lot more on the Samana prana, but let's move on. The poses that best realign or undissipate, I don't have the word for undissipate this prana, are any kind of twists, but please don't put them in the beginning of a class. Twisting is the body must be ready for twisting because the spine has to be fluid in all directions before we start twisting. So generally put twists in the third part of class or once you're, really quite warmed up. And forward folds, as you know, when you forward fold, if you've ever been pregnant, you can't get any breath. So for those of you who haven't been pregnant, forward folds are good for realigning and reuniting and healthifying. Okay, for my non-English speakers, that's not a word. For restoring the Samana Vayu. From Nata Muni's Yoga Rahasya, and that is a pretty old treatise. They have mentioned two more Prana Vayus, one being Prajapatya Vayu, which is holding a baby in pregnancy, and the Sutika Vayu, which is labor and delivery. That will come forward in prenatal. Now, a word about stagnation. I have a nice picture here of a stagnant pond. When we focus too much on one part of the body, for instance, you have a class centered on heart openers. If you don't balance that out, then the opposing muscle groups, as well as the opposing mind elements and metaphysical elements, will stagnate. This is why I keep saying balance your back bends out, balance your forward folds out. It is okay once you've done a real focus on forward folding, or you've done a lot of things that bend at the hip flexors, to simply do a rise up and very nice lion breath back bend. That will be a balancing pose. Or my favorite baby Bhujangasana, Ardha Bhujangasana, the half, what do we call that? Half cobra or lifted cobra. When things stagnate. For instance, I explained in the pranayama video that if you don't breathe all out before taking a small breath in before Kapalabhati, you've got all this air up here that will never be used because you're moving the lower part of your belly and it is cleansing the lower parts of your lungs, and this stagnates. So what we want to do in all of yoga is balance everything and in all of life. And that, I believe, is one of the most beautiful pictures of a clean water body. And we are mostly water in our body, so we need this balancing. Yoga asanas help balance the entire system. Meditation helps balance, and working thought. So the studying of sacred texts or the studying of the science of yoga, that all is added to the purification. What is the difference between stagnation and clean water? Purely the fact that with clean water, there is a tributary. I don't know if that's the word. Oh, this is another word I always forget. Is the tributary the one moving in? So you have the water moving in, Einlass, we say in German, and you also have the water moving out. You can have water moving into an area that is still stagnant because, because, in floods, you get all this green, slimy stuff building up, flooding over, because it doesn't have a tributary. I think that is the word, where the water can flow out. This is also, in a spiritual sense, we can teach all this stuff, But if there is no way for it to flow out, it will stagnate. And what is a way for it to flow out? Karma yoga, Raja yoga. That means kindness. It doesn't just mean your asanas, it means giving. You receive through the knowledge, the work, the meditation. Opening up and giving is what creates the beauty and the cleanliness of the flow. Excellent. Let us look now at the Vyana Vayu. And this, I mentioned before, the Vyana Vayu is rather more closely related to the Vijnana kosha. Here we have the koshas, and the Vyana Vayu, although its name is very closely related to the Vijnanamaya kosha, that Vijnanamaya kosha is more the monkey mind. And the Manamaya kosha is more, I think, closely related to the Vyana Vayu because it is a bit more metaphysical. We could call it metaphysically bringing us out of the gross, lower elements. And I don't mean that in kind of lower being worse. It just a word. There are no words for this, so we do our best. So Manamaya kosha is also related a little bit more closely to the Vishuddha chakra and the Ajna chakra. Here we see in this cute little drawing that the Vijnanamaya kosha is kind of everywhere, and it is the element of Vayu that is the flow. It begins sort of in the center where the Prana Vayu has drawn the energy in, and it circulates throughout the entire system. All levels, gross and subtle, physical and metaphysical, arms, legs, and all around the body are kind of drawn into this Vyana Vayu. The Vyana Vayu is responsible for the energy created, processed, balanced, and maintained by the prana and the Samana Vayus. And it also causes the outflow of waste through the Apana Vayu. So you see, all of them are kind of coming together, sort of like at the end of a really good show where all the characters are on stage and you're getting close to the end. I don't know if that's a good example. This is the distribution mechanism, supplies energy to the circulatory system. It's an outward moving system from the central all over the body. And let me bring this back up. Here we have the Vyana Vayu, and seen here kind of showing itself going through like everything, connecting everything. Controls the voluntary and involuntary muscles of the body. So you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous systems. When Vyana prana is low, we're lethargic. This could be mentally or physically. We can be very active physically on a conveyor belt, but absolutely lethargic mentally. You can be absolutely lethargic physically and absolutely active mentally. So this one can be either or both. Disturbances of this Vyana Vayu. This one is very closely related to thought, but also ailments to joints and muscular skeletal systems because it's everywhere. Mind-body connection, arthritis, inflammation of the joints, tendonitis, all of those connective tissues. And if this Vayu is strong, you're energetic and active and flexible. So all of these things, think further, go beyond. The asana is best for the Vyana Vayu. Let me mention one, sun salutation. I mean, you can just see it because within the sun salutation, you have everything. And here is what I found on the internet. I thought such a pretty little drawing. You see the light coming in, and the asana Surya Namaskar is the name in Sanskrit for the sun salutation. Also, warrior poses, Virabhadrasana poses, are helpful in realigning or bringing from diffusion into its place, just correcting this Vyana Vayu. We move from here to the Udana Vayu, which we see as this sort of purple or pink area in the head. It is the process, once kind of complete, of the system moving upward. It operates, in the gross sense, the neck and the head, and the nervous system. The glands and hormones associated with this prana vayu are those within the brain, for instance, the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, which are kind of considered as orchestra conductors, kind of bringing it all together, channeling things. The thyroid is sort of within the Vyana prana vayu, and also this Udana prana vayu. The direction of this prana vayu is upward and kind of linked to the higher thought process. For instance, when we overcome something that has been irksome all our life, but we realize that we can overcome it, there's this sort of rush where we think, oh my goodness, I'm free of that. And we actually feel it going upward. When we read a wonderful poem, did you know that even way back, Emily Dickinson said, I know I've read a good poem when the top of my head feels like it's blowing off. There is something that the masters knew, and we now identify it in the science of yoga. Here you see the Udana Prana, upward motion, head. All of them are connected. These prana vayus are never disconnected, but some might be out of whack or have left the sphere or have dissipated. And once you have mastered these, the higher states of consciousness, and it's hard and it takes a long time and it takes sacrifice and it takes learning and also devotion to a certain extent. When we have mastered this vayu, we are in balance mentally and also physically, as far as all of the glands that are from the thyroid up are concerned. And you can look at that. I think I have it pretty well outlined in the anatomy section. But when it's out of whack, you've got, tonsillitis, thyroid, vocal issues, nervous disorders. So since vocal issues are included, you see we're now back to the Vishuddha chakra and not just the Ajna or Sahasrara. So good, strong Udana prana is, for instance, when the great yogis would meditate, and I talked about this, that their body temperature would drop. But also when they focus on the Udana prana, that is when levitation happens. Whether you believe it or not, it has been recorded over centuries that monks could levitate. Poses that can help with this vayu or bring attention to the vayu are bridge pose, Matsyasana, the fish pose, Sarangasana, shoulder stand, Halasana, plow, Sirsasana, headstand, but I'm not a big proponent of headstand. Use, if you can, a headstand holder or lots of arm strength. And Ujjayi pranayama will balance this. So the Ujjayi is that loud one, whether it's connected with other prana exercises or not, it is the one that makes noise here. And that will also help in balancing the Udana prana. And just a little tip for those who have trouble sleeping, focusing on the Udana prana and the upward motion by inhalation. It's almost like the inhalation allows the upward motion, and the exhalation is the upward motion. So it's always upward motion. That puts me to sleep. If I can remember to think about it, it's very helpful in going to sleep. All right.